Recently, I failed super hard at a 30-day habit challenge that I call the phone challenge. And I want to talk about some very important things I feel like I learned from my failure. So the challenge started because I wanted to take the time I was spending on my phone back. The simplest approach I could think of was to shorten my screen time hours from its average of about 4 hours to 2 or less hours. Simple, right? But it's actually not if you have like a MacBook Pro or iPad, which I basically used to start cheating. But of course I could have used the screen time to track the apps instead of the devices. But I began to realize something else anyways, which is a lot of the time I spent on my phone is on like Messenger or Messages, which are two apps that I use to talk to my friends, which I enjoy doing. I began to ask myself, do I really want to shorten that? This was about 1 week after I started the challenge, but I decided to change it at this point to no mindless pickups or usage instead. And it definitely felt more right and in line with what I wanted to do. It was more about saving time from mindless things I did on my phone, like picking it up or just looking at it and like swiping left and right on the home screen, stuff like that, instead of like taking time away from things I enjoyed. So after a week, I started this new challenge and did it for 2 weeks. I tracked mindless usage and mindless pickups. During this time, I became very aware of how I habitually reached out to my phone whenever I saw it. This was a good thing because I started to change that, and every time I looked at my phone, I had to have a purpose before using my phone. Unfortunately, I began to cheat the system again by making my purpose, I want to check notifications. And I did this frequently enough to the point I had to like restrict myself by saying that I can only do it 10 times a day. But everything began getting way too troublesome to keep track of. During days where I hung out with friends and had to communicate a lot in that day, it became way too difficult to track any of it basically. And at some point I just gave up because it was too chaotic and taking way too much time and energy away from me, which was sort of like it goes against the whole purpose of the thing, and it made me stressed out too. So this is the first important lesson. If your habit you're trying to develop is actively harming you rather than helping you, perhaps it isn't a habit worth forming. No mindless pickups and uses sounds like a great idea, but in practice, it requires you to constantly have your mind active on not reaching your phone or using it, and it takes extra energy to do the habit than it is just to let yourself pick it up and then put it somewhere else where you don't see it anymore. That I found was much better. So I changed the habit again and made it no using my phone during the morning, which was much better and easier to do. This still took willpower and effort, but the energy I spent gave me more focus and attention back, which in turn resulted in a net gain in total benefits and actually made me feel like I was saving energy in the long run. It was still really hard to do this habit during days where I needed to communicate with people in the morning. But those days were exceptions to that challenge. And that's another important lesson. Learn to recognize that there are days where there must be exceptions, and don't be hard on yourself when you're experiencing that day. Not every day can go according to plan, and being flexible and adaptable seems to be the best approach here. In the end, I'd say the 30-day or more like 40-day challenge ended up as a failure. I didn't stick with one habit long enough for it to be a meaningful change in my life, and the goal of the challenge was indeed to form a habit that will get time back from my phone. I think I'll try again for the no morning uses, but for the time being, I'm going to move on to a different habit challenge. And that is another important lesson. When you're failing too much at a single habit, or in my case, many variations of a habit, I think it's better overall to just take a break from it and then come back to it at a later time. I'm gonna try some easier habit challenges next to get some small victories, and then I'll come back to this phone challenge. In terms of advice, specifically for like phone-related challenges, I'd say the easiest way, like I mentioned earlier, is just place your phone somewhere else if you want to use it less. As long as you have stuff to do during the day, if you make the item less accessible, you'll use it less. It's really as simple as that. So that is what I'll try to do instead. while I wait for the moment where I tackle this phone challenge again. As a final tip, before you start a challenge, I highly recommend you decide whether or not you're doing it as a one-time thing, or if you want it to be an actual habit afterwards. I think if I were to have stuck with the screen time challenge, it would have been more of like a one-time thing, while the morning use restriction was more of a habit I wanted to make in the long term. I think by knowing this, you'll find more success with these challenges because you know whether it'll just be like a temporary thing so you can push for that energy, or you're building it to last. So you want to make sure like you're not using so much energy to the point you're going to burn out. Okay, those were all the things I learned from failing this habit challenge. I'm going to make sure the next one is a success by making it super simple. If you enjoyed any piece of advice that I just offered, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.